Dogman chased me right off a cliff. Dear Scary Stories NYC. There was this time in my life when I lost everything, or so I thought. My wife left me, I lost my job, I lost my home, my wife took custody of my son. In my final session with my therapist, he told me I needed to find a way to relax. I went camping since I could no longer afford any of the more expensive ways of relaxing, and I walked into the forest hoping for some peace and quiet. Instead, the Dogman chased me right off a cliff. So here's how it happened. I was camping in the pictured Rocks Woods in northern Michigan. It's that part of Michigan over by Lake Superior that's actually attached to Wisconsin, but it's called Michigan anyway for some reason. They have beautiful cliffs overlooking the water over there, and there's a lot of nature to hike and camp in, elevated up in the woods on top of those cliffs. So that's where I was, in the woods on top of those cliffs at 3 or 4 in the morning, peeing onto the side of a tree. I was extremely groggy. I kept rubbing my eyes, but I kept seeing blurry. I wasn't sure I wanted to actually see what I was stepping on and through anyway, so I just stood there with my eyes closed, and I finished my business. Then I heard a sound that I didn't like over my right shoulder. It sure sounded like an angry animal to me. What kind of animal was that? A bear? No, not a bear. A cat? Closer to a cat, but no, maybe a very big cat. I prayed I was dreaming, and I was afraid to open my eyes. The growl turned to a snarl and grew louder. I began to wonder if I was dreaming those sounds. If it was a dream, then opening my eyes might end it. On the other hand, if it was a dream, I might open my eyes and see some impossible nightmare image that might give me a heart attack. I began to smell the odor of a large animal in the vicinity. It smelled like backstage at the zoo, a smell only the older of you out there will be able to remember anymore. Can you dream a smell? I don't know, maybe you can. I don't remember ever doing it though, so I was pretty sure that there was a big, real beast out in the night, and that he or she or it was unhappy with my presence peeing on that tree. Rather than flipping out as is the norm with me, I became extremely calm. I slowly, carefully, quietly finished my business, wrapping myself up, and thought silently about how I should go about my plan of getting back into my tent before being torn apart by whatever creature it was that I hadn't gotten the nerve up to open my eyes and look at yet. I made up my mind to move slowly and calmly no matter what kind of creature it might turn out to be. Even if I opened my eyes and I saw that it was King Kong, I was going to remain quiet and slowly remove myself from the situation. I repeated internally, I am calm in all situations and circumstances, over and over and over, as a mantra. Nothing in the world could cause me to panic. I was ready for the worst, and I was sticking with the plan. I braced myself for all potential possibilities I could imagine I would see when I opened my eyes. I thought I was prepared for anything. So then I opened my eyes and I looked in the direction I had heard the snarling coming from. At my eye level, I saw the fur-covered chest of a hairy monster man. Turning my gaze up, I saw that this gentleman was blessed with the head of some kind of prehistoric, yet intelligent wolf. Moving my eyes down, I saw that the fellow was a nudist. Of course, fur covered for him with clothing covered for me, so I was certainly not judging him. I could not yet make out his legs, but his arms did not appear either human or canine. His claws or hands looked like werewolf hands from an old horror movie. My brain took this information in and had no answer for me as to what I was looking at. My best guess at the time was that it was a wolf-headed werewolf. I know how stupid that sounds in retrospect, but I hadn't seen any modern werewolf movies yet when this happened. To me, a werewolf was a guy made up to look like the old Lon Chaney Jr. pictures. This creature's head looked completely like a Stone Age wolf, a primitive, feral version of a dog. But it was standing up on its hind legs like a naked caveman. I'm not really sure what it was, but looking back on it, it could only have been the Dogman, right? I panicked. I screamed. I ran away, screeching like a 2-year-old. I completely forgot my plan and I panicked. That's all I can say. I'm not even going to try to defend myself. I'm not going to try to defend my manhood either or my behavior. I wonder if I would have done the same thing if it had been a bear or a mountain lion. Well, maybe I would have run away, but I'm not sure they would have let me run so far as the Dogman did. I didn't run back to my camp and jump into my tent. I probably would have been safe then if I had. I've heard extremely few stories since then of a Dogman tearing its way into someone's tent. I think they respect those boundaries. Ripping up people in our tents and homes while we sleep would probably be going too far. Even if the authorities don't want to say these things are real, I think if Dogman started wiping out too many campers, I have a feeling the feds would move in and there would be a war. I don't think the Dogman want that. I think they're too smart for that. But I wasn't thinking clearly at all that night. I had seen the most terrifying creature that walks this planet Earth. I had smelled him. I had looked into his soulless, glowing eyes. And I was feeling fear like I had never felt it before. I didn't even know where I was running. I was lost in the woods almost before I even began. I ran wildly in the darkness. Sometimes it was hard to see. Other times the light of the moon poked through, and I had fairly clear night vision. One time I turned around hoping I had gotten away from the creature, only to see it pacing me, about 30 or 40 feet behind. It was in that moment that I saw it in full body for the first time. It was like a man, but its legs were like those of a dog. The hind legs of a dog, I mean. He ran on them in an upright human manner, but those legs looked like dog or wolf legs. This gave him a bit of the appearance of the ancient god Pan, humanoid on top, but animal underneath. I wondered for a brief instant if sightings of werewolves might have led to the invention of god forms like Pan or the devil, but then I remembered that neither of those archetypes had the heads of wolves. I was so out of breath that I wanted to lie down and pass out, yet I was so terrified and charged with adrenaline that I kept running anyway. I think if someone had shot me in that moment, I would have kept running for another half hour. I was that panicked and fear-drenched. A second time that I turned around to see if I had gotten away from the Dogman, he sped right past me, almost knocking me down in the process. Once this giant got in front of me, I craned my neck back to look up into his eyes and to try to understand his intent. What I saw when I stared up into those glowing orbs was not hunger, nor was it anger. It was glee. He had me cornered. He had me locked in deep, terrified fear, and he was enjoying every second of it. Letting out some sort of a sound not entirely unlike a barking sound, he sent me back running in the direction I had been coming from. He was herding me. He was deciding for me which direction I would run. I was lost in those woods, unaware which way was north, south, east, or west. Was the Dogman as well? Or was he knowingly and deliberately herding me in one particular direction? The giant gray canine man would run ahead of me and run circles around me, but then fall back and return to chasing me. He could have tackled me down any time he wanted. My fear and agony seemed to be his entertainment, or even his food. He seemed to be toying with me. Maybe he wanted me to run and run until I tired myself out. Then I'd be easy pickings for the Dogman. I was so revved up with fear and adrenaline that I was willing to take my chances, that I could try to just run forever. I had forgotten that we were running around in a forest on the top of a cliff. I had forgotten that running forever isn't an option, when you're on land way up in the sky. Sooner or later, you're gonna reach the edge of that cliff, and then you're gonna run out of real estate very suddenly. That's basically what happened to me that night. I ran toward a lighter part of those woods, thinking there must be a clearing on the other side. Maybe there would be people in that clearing. Maybe I would be safe if I could get into a crowd of others. I motored toward that clearing, but when I got there, I realized with shocking suddenness that there were not only not trees in that clearing, there was no ground either. Looking down, I saw that I was about to leap off that cliff. In fact, I was about to run at top speed off that cliff, and my head reflexively turned downward. I saw the ground running out, and I saw the tide beating against the large rocks far below. I also, in that split second, saw a deeper pool of water underneath me, in only a slightly different angle to my right. Using my last few running steps to correct my course, I ran out of those woods, off of that cliff, leaping to my right, and praying that my momentum would carry me past those boulders and into the water, where it would be safer to land. Well, I smashed up on the rocks and died that night. This is my ghost telling you this story now. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, I made it. I don't know how deep the water was that I landed in, but the force of my momentum drove me so deep into it that my feet touched the bottom before I swam back up for air. I'll tell you another sensation I had as I was landing in the water and sinking momentarily to the bottom. I sensed another big splash in the water to my right. It happened a second or two or three after my splashdown. At the time, I thought it was the Dogman, and I was frantically looking around for him as I held my breath and swam back up to the surface. Then, once my head got back above water and I was gasping air, I was still looking around for the Dogman. I didn't see him on my level in the water. I didn't see him up on top of the cliff either, but that didn't mean he wasn't up there. I have no idea to this day if he made the leap with me or not. It's possible that the other splash I heard was rocks or dirt that I may have dislodged when I jumped. Maybe it was just parts of the cliff that I accidentally brought down with me. If it was that Dogman, then he must have either hit his head on the way down or swam away very quickly, because I never saw him anywhere, ever again. I'm lucky I survived. It was a miracle that I didn't even have any broken bones. Whenever I remember this story, I shake all over. Chills go through me when I think of how many ways I could have not survived the time that Dogman chased me right off a cliff. Don't go anywhere. We've got the story of the two-headed Dogman coming up in a second, but first, you know who's great? That Julie Sadler. Put her in a boat and she's a paddler. Turn her to a snake and she's a rattler. Our executive producer, Julie Sadler. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, Julie Sadler, for making this episode possible. In exchange, we share with her our secret Sunday uncensored episodes, stories far too wild to tell on this channel. Julie also gets access to our entire 21-hour archive of secret uncensored stories, and she gets to see our shows in advance of the public whenever possible. You can gain these and other perks too by either joining our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or else by clicking the join link under this or any of our videos. We'll have more info at the very end of the show, but now let's jump into that second story we promised you. This one isn't just about the Dogman. It's about a very specific kind of Dogman, and that would explain why we call this one the Two-Headed Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was in high school, I had a friend named Mervin who told me that his older brother Stanley claimed to have seen a two-headed werewolf on the shoreline of Eli Lake. Stanley was piloting his friend's small motorboat out on the lake at the time when he and his friend alleged to have had this sighting. Stanley claimed the creature was on land, both heads independently eating at something large lying on the shore, which the boys assumed that the two-headed beast had probably caught himself. According to the story Mervyn told me, the two different wolf-like heads fought with each other over the one piece of meat. It was a pretty lurid story, and my friend told it enthusiastically, adding details about the blood slobbering out of the monsters' mouths and stuff like that. Sometimes, when one head would try to eat meat that the other head had claimed, they would snap at each other with an almost rabid kind of savage viciousness. I believed this entire story without question. Granted, I was more gullible and trusting in those days, but also we were located just to the northeast of count 'em, three nuclear power plants, and so most people my age at the time accepted the concept of multiple-headed mutants roaming the countryside as at least plausible. Our parents' generation had raised us on movies about atomic power creating monsters. Then, that same generation erected 3 power plants just to the southwest of the area I grew up in. Why would I not believe a two-headed werewolf story? But even though I believed it, I still lived in the safer world most of the time. You know, the safer world that teachers and parents both approved of. The world where monsters didn't really exist. Then, one day, the two-headed Dogman story got a little more real for me, cementing itself into fact when my friend Mervyn's older brother Stanley came to pick him up and drive him home from school. I got to talk to Stanley in person for about a minute and get the story from him directly, or at least a very shortened version of it. He told me that his rich friend Stoney was staying over for a few days on the way to driving west to California, and Stoney brought his motorboat with him, strapped to the top of his car. So Stoney and Stanley went out on the lake, and that's where they saw the two-headed creature on the shore. At first they didn't know what it was they were seeing. They were both wondering what this moving, dark mass was that they saw on the mainland beach, just a bit south of Maple Island. You could only go so far in Maple Lake before you have to turn around and go back, and when they passed the scene for the second time on the way back, they took the boat in a little bit closer to get a better look. Sure enough, it was not two creatures close next to each other. It really was one two-headed Bigfoot-type animal, but both of its heads were like dog heads. You know, come to think of it, my family used to fish over there when I was younger before this story went around. After this story, we only ever ate fish from the supermarket because none of us wanted to grow a second head like that Dogman. The supermarket probably caught their fish at Maple Lake anyway. So, taking that boat back around to look at the creature better seemed to agitate this two-headed thing. It jumped over and past what it had been eating at and charged the beach, running bipedally up to the lake's edge. It seemed fully coordinated, as though it had one brain, and yet the two heads were snarling and growling at each other as much as they were at the two of them on the boat. They got a nice clear look at that animal, who was very much like an upright dog in most ways. His posture was so human-like, however, it seemed so comfortable as a biped, that it gave the impression of being a hybrid kind of species. The presence of two competing dog heads may be what made Stanley feel it wasn't just a dog that had learned to walk upright. It seemed to him like even if this thing had only one head, it would probably still be thought of as a monster. The two of them invited me to come monster hunting with them that weekend. I had to decline the invitation for family reasons, as in, I asked my mom, and she said I couldn't go. I have no regrets about that, though, since Stanley, Mervyn, and their friends got picked up by the local police for prowling around in people's backyards, looking for their two-headed nuclear-powered Dogman. Turns out pretty much every inch of land over there is private property, and those guys never should have set foot ashore anywhere. I'd give you the same advice. Please leave the nice people who live over there alone. I didn't see anything there. I've never even visited the place, and I'm not saying that two-headed cryptids live there. I'm just saying that 35 years ago, somebody told me a rumor that he heard about a person claiming to have seen a two-headed Dogman-type creature. So that's like a friend of a friend tale. It's a curiosity. And that's also why I had nearly forgotten about all of this when, years later, about 12 years later, the two-headed werewolf would become a really big thing in my life. and my first wife Sheila's life, too. Sheila and I were camping out at the campgrounds next to Eli Lake, north of the area we were just talking about. We were out and walking about in the night, which I'm not sure is the most advisable thing to do in the unlit wilderness. We were kind of having an argument, and she kept walking away from me like a cat each time I made a good point in my defense. I kept following and asking her if we could please go back inside and resolve this, but then she would move further into the dark woods, possibly onto someone else's property. I can't remember the details of whatever trivial nonsense it was that we were arguing over, but I remember the moment when it all slipped away like a glacier heated up by a giant buried flying saucer. All of a sudden, it didn't matter what I meant when I said that outfit didn't make her look fat. All of a sudden, life got very real with us, but in a very surreal way. We had both stumbled around a turn, over a hill, around some trees, and there we were, face to face with something that 9 out of 10 people will tell you does not exist. It was clearly an oversized wolf of some sort, but I mean an absurdly oversized one. Sheila whispered that there were 2 of them, and that was when I saw the second dog head. Both of them were hunkered down over the remains of a bear, and they were feeding in a ravenous and desperate fashion. Had they brought that bear down? What kind of creatures hunt bear? Sheila's whispering had caused the canine head on our right to react. He looked over and immediately spotted us. This resulted in some form of agitated disagreement between the 2 large dogs. They both stood up at once and went back on their hind legs. It was clear this was not a species of wolves we were looking at. This was the species known as the Michigan Dogman. It was also equally clear that these were not 2 wolf-headed animals. This was one 2-headed dogman. It had to be the same one that had been reported down south in my youth. Unless this is a common mutation now, this had to have been the exact same creature. We began backing out of the scene, keeping our eyes on the dogman arguing with itself. The head on our right seemed to want to pursue us, but the head on the left wanted him to shut up so he could get back to eating bear. This was a basic policy argument, at least in my opinion. Imagine having all that strength, but never agreeing on what to do with your power. This is why my father used to tell me that the little man who is of one mind can sometimes succeed, where the large man of divided mind may fail. It wasn't just some kind of riddle. It was a simple truth that's often easy to forget. While that great beast was of divided mind, Sheila and I single-mindedly maneuvered ourselves backward out of that situation. And then, once we were out of their view, we made a run for it. It sounded like they continued to argue among themselves, divided, the entire time we made our getaway. If you look at Google's satellite view, you may notice a long walkway of green seems to exist in a roughly north-south direction between that campground and Paw Paw, where the first story took place. I can imagine how the creature might have walked from one place to another. Google Maps tells me that a human being can do that same walk in under 10 hours. So why couldn't the creature have done the walk in the 10 or 12 years that had elapsed since the original alleged sighting? In both stories, the 2 heads clearly seem to disagree with each other and squabble. I think these are conjoined twins, and I think they're the same ones that were seen a decade or so earlier. It's been longer since that second sighting than it had been between the 2, so I don't think the creature survives in the region any longer. I would expect he's probably stuffed and hidden away in some hunter's super secret private collection. It sounds like something that couldn't possibly be, but I saw it with my own 2 eyes, and so I can no longer doubt the reality of the 2-headed dogman. Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. We're working on figuring out how to add the $10 level to the PayPal Club too. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal Subscribers Club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal Club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.